Hello, my American literature students, and welcome to Tuesday, April the 21st. Today, we're going to begin the Crucible, Act 1, Part 1. You won't be reading the entirety of the act, so if you look through the pages in the PDF and you're like, Mr. Roff, this is like 48 pages of reading. Have no fear, you're only reading the first half, not the entirety. Before we start reading today, I want to go through and remind you of the essential questions of our unit. For this particular play, for our last text that we're going to read together, these three essential questions about groupthink and hysteria, obstructing the democratic process, looking at the ideal purpose of law and how human depravity limits justice within a society, and one's reputation and name and what that is worth fighting to protect. Those are the questions that are going to be driving our discussions of this particular play. We talked a little bit yesterday about the background and the context, but I want to be a little more specific with where the historical setting of this particular play is. Even though this play was first written and performed in the 1950s, we said that this is set in 1692 during the Salem witch trials, and it is set in Salem, Massachusetts, which you can see a photo of over here on the screen. So yes, we are going to be back with the Puritans. Now, this is not going to be Nathaniel Hawthorne's take on the Puritans. This is Arthur Miller, who is our playwright. It's his take on the Puritans. And he has a very different view of the Puritans. Remember, Nathaniel Hawthorne had a ancestor that was part of the Salem witch trials. We'll actually meet him in Act 3, so just beware of Hathorne, who's one of the judges, is actually related to one of our authors, Nathaniel Hawthorne. And remember, we found out yesterday that Arthur Miller wrote this play to highlight the dangers of the communist witch hunts in the 1940s and 50s. This play was really in response to what was going on in the United States, and specifically in Hollywood, which was his area of interest during the 40s and 50s, as people were being accused of being communists, regardless of the evidence that would be presented against them. But it's going to be set in the 1690s. So, old times, but written in the 20th century. All right. Another thing I want to do is point out a unique part of this play. Arthur Miller kind of gives his own take on the story at various points in these lengthy paragraphs. So pages 3 through 7, if you look at the text itself, is going to be a significant amount of background on the play. So it's not actually talking about necessarily the events of the play. It's going to give some context of some of the characters. It's going to talk about a few of the main themes. So you can read that, but just know that it's not about the plot of the story. We will look at a few pages within that section momentarily after you've read. And then finally, let's talk about the characters. Now, The Moon is Down was fairly simple. We had the townspeople, we had the invaders. There was two camps. In this particular story, there are a lot more characters. And so keeping them straight is going to be a bit of a challenge. So I'm going to highlight a few of them. You're going to meet them in more detail, obviously, during the course of the story. So the first set of characters is the Paris household. Okay, so you have, I don't know why I did that. Let's make it a circle instead. So you have Reverend Paris, Betty Paris, and Tituba. Reverend Paris is a reverend in the town. Betty is his daughter, and Tituba is their slave. Okay, she actually is a slave that lives and works in their home. Okay, so that's the Paris family. We'll talk more about Reverend Paris shortly. Then you're going to meet a group of girls. Now, these are young girls between 14 and 18 years old, maybe as old as 20, and they are unmarried, and they work in various people's houses. So you have Susanna Walcott, you have Mercy Lewis, and Mary Warren. Now, of those three, Mary Warren is going to be the most important to pay attention to, because she is going to show up again and again throughout the course of the story. The main characters that we meet, or the major characters that we meet, are two individuals. These pictures, by the way, come from the 1996 film version starring Daniel Day-Lewis and Winona Ryder. And Daniel Day-Lewis in that film plays a character named John Proctor. And Winona Ryder plays a character by the name of Abigail Williams. They're both going to be very important. John Proctor is a farmer. Abigail Williams used to work in John Proctor's house, but she was dismissed by his wife for reasons that will become a little more clear as you read Act 1. So, at this point, it's time to read. It's time to jump in. So you're going to pause the video. You're going to read just pages 2 through 24. You're going to stop after page 24. So if you looked at the entire act and you're like, this is long, again, you're only going to read half of it. And some of the dialogue reads pretty quickly. So just remember, if it's 20 pages, some of those pages are going to go pretty fast. You're also going to complete your reading observation assignment, which you can find on Google Classroom. Remember, you need 4 total observations and 1 per category. You're going to turn that in on Google Classroom before you come back and watch the rest of the video. So pause the video here, read the act, work on your reading assignment, and then come back and we will talk about some of the details in a little bit more specifics. So pause the video and I'll see you in a few minutes. All right, welcome back. We are going to now discuss some key scenes within this particular act. And there are some subtle pieces going on, so I want to just highlight those with you. And I'll be jumping between this slide and also going into the text and highlighting a few key details. So let's start with Reverend Paris. Why is this man so worried? And to notice some details from the text, it would help if I had the play pulled up. And I'm going to go to page 7. Now, what's important to know is that this particular society in Salem, right, is a theocracy. I'll grab my highlighter. Okay, it says the people of Salem developed a theocracy, a combine of the state and religious power, whose function was to complete the community together. So this is not a democratic government in the way we think of it. It is a theocracy, which means that the people who are the religious leaders, guys like Reverend Paris, are actually in charge of the government. There's no separation here between church and state. Remember, this is pre-Constitution by almost 100 years. So we're not dealing with that separation that we have in our democratic government today. Okay, so that's important. Reverend Paris is concerned because his daughter Betty has come back from the woods and something's wrong with her, right? She is sick, right? And she's in this catatonic, comatose state, and they don't know what's going on. And what's happened is this is a very close-knit community, so everybody knows everybody else. Everybody's up in each other's business all the time. And their people have gathered, right, outside of Reverend Paris's home. His daughter is sick in bed, right? And you can see him on page 8, begging Betty, right? Wake up, open your eyes, Betty, little one. Now, you can certainly question whether or not Reverend Paris is concerned about his daughter's well-being or concerned, as he highlights on page 10, about the public perception of what's going on, right? What's actually happened. And you see him as he's interrogating Abigail, who is his niece, right? So they're related. He has taken her in. So Abigail Williams is Reverend Paris's niece. He wants to know what happened. It must come out. My enemies will bring it out. Let me know what you've done, Abigail. Do you understand that I have many enemies? So Paris is paranoid that the people in the town who don't like his rule, who don't like his preaching, who don't want him to be there, they're going to use this as a tool to kick him out, right, to throw him out of power, to overthrow his rule. And so he doesn't want that to go on. And he continues to question Abigail, specifically her reputation. So really, I go to the bottom of page 11 and top of page 12. You can see both pages here. He says, I have given you a home, right? Your parents will find out died. I've put clothes on your back. I've given you everything you have. Your name in the town, is it entirely white? Is it not? And I'm going to write a word by name, reputation. So very early on, Reverend Paris is bringing up one of those main themes of this story, reputation. Abigail, people have a strong opinion of you, right? Your reputation is solid. And she's like, of course it is. Of course it is, Uncle. Everything is fine. So reputation matters. So I think that's why Reverend Paris is so worried and concerned. Let's skip back to the slides real quick. Let's talk specifically about Betty Paris, because at one point in the act, Betty Paris kind of wakes up, right? She sort of is stirred. And we have to question whether or not she's actually sick or ill. So let's go to the act again. We're going to highlight a few details, right? She's afraid of her father, certainly, but there's somebody else that she's specifically afraid of. And probably has, good reason to be afraid of this individual, right? And that would be Abigail Williams. So Betty is shaken awake on page 19 finally, right? And you can see Abigail doing that in the middle of the page, right? She sits Betty up and furiously shakes her. I'll beat you, Betty. Betty whimpers. Looks like you're improving. Now, Betty is afraid because these girls, this group of women, young girls, went out into the woods. They went out into the woods, and Abigail, according to Betty, drank blood. You didn't tell him that. And she says, you did. You drank a charm to kill John Proctor's wife. You drank a charm to kill Goody Proctor. Now, Goody, by the way, it's going to be used a lot in this play. Goody is just a reference to like Mrs., right? So a married woman, a good wife, the abbreviation there is Goody. Okay, so they're just referring to a woman there. Okay, but let's get back to the line. Betty accuses Abigail of drinking a charm, drinking blood, so that she would kill John Proctor's wife. Now, we find out a little bit later about why she might have wanted to kill John Proctor's wife, but that's for a few minutes from now. Now, Abigail is not someone who's going to back down from a challenge, right? She slaps Betty across the face. Shut it. Now shut it, right? Betty's calling to her mother, who, by the way, is dead. Okay, her dead mother, not her living mother. And then Abigail makes this threat, right? She says, we danced, and Tituba conjured Ruth Putnam's dead sisters, and that is all. And mark my word, let either of you breathe a word or the edge of a word about the other things, and I will come to you in the black of some terrible night, and I will bring a pointy reckoning that will shudder you. So Abigail is legit threatening these other girls. Like, I am not afraid to stab you, to harm you, to destroy you. This is a threat. And she backs up that threat by saying that I've seen some bad stuff in my day. I saw Indians smash my dead parents' heads on the pillow next to mine. I've seen some reddish work done at night. I've seen some bad things. Right? I know the way the world works, and I am not afraid to defend myself. Now, one of the other elements that's going on here is that Abigail and these girls are kind of stuck. They're kind of stuck in society because they're not married. They have very little rights, and all they can really do is function as servants in other people's homes. And I want to draw your attention to where the text kind of talks about this in beginning of Act 1 on page 7. Okay, so at the end of that first paragraph, the witch hunt was a perverse manifestation of the panic which set in among all classes when a balance began to turn towards greater individual freedom. Right? We know the Puritan society from reading the Scarlet Letter is very restrictive. And as more freedoms began to come out in the society, well, people wanted to push back against that. And so there's this balance between control and freedom. When one rises above the individual villainy displayed, one can pity them all, just as we shall be pitied someday. It is still impossible for man to organize his social life without repressions, and the balance is yet to be struck between order and freedom. So this conflict, order and freedom, is important to recognize within the course of the story. All right, a couple more small little details I want to draw out. Thomas and Ann Putnam, these two characters. Now, by the way, I should mention at this point, Reverend Parris, Betty Parris, Thomas and Ann Putnam, even John and Abigail. These are all historical people. Arthur Miller, he did a ton of research on this play, on the Salem witch trials before he wrote the play. So these people were all real. Right? Thomas and Ann Putnam actually existed in history. And he draws our attention to the way that they work within this town on pages 12, 13, 14, and 15. So again, let's go back to the text. So on page 12, Ann Putnam enters, right? Ann Putnam enters. And she goes to Reverend Parris, whose daughter is sick in bed. We don't know what's wrong with her. And she offers these comforting words. The very bottom of page 12, she says, "It is a marvel. It is surely a stroke of hell upon you." I mean, can you imagine somebody coming over to your house when you have a sick family member and them saying, well, you know, this person's state, it's the stroke of hell upon you, right? It's the stroke of hell. I mean, very comforting. Thank you, Miss Ann Putnam. We appreciate that. Now, she's also spreading some rumors. Okay, how high did she fly? How high? Right? Well, what's that all about? So Ann Putnam, Miss Putnam here, is bringing up the issue of witchcraft, right? And further on page 13, I'd not call it sick. The devil's touch is heavier than sick. The devil's touch, right? Oh, okay, so here we know what's going on. Now, on page 14 and 15, our buddy Arthur Miller provides us with some context as to why this might be important. Thomas Putnam, her husband, so Ann Putnam and Thomas Putnam go together. And in this section where we have a word about Thomas Putnam, he was historically known to be the person who made many of the accusations of witchcraft within the town of Salem in 1692. So he feels grieved or aggrieved by something happening, right? Thomas Putnam felt that the name and honor of his family had been smirched by the village, and so he was going to right the matter however he could, potentially by accusing a lot of individuals of witchcraft. Again, when people feel like their reputation has been attacked, they want to fight out and protect. We're going to see that over and over again, people fighting to protect their reputation. Speaking of reputation, John Proctor. All right, John Proctor and Abigail Williams. They have a little conversation in the section that you read. And, the question is, what knowledge did Proctor give to Abigail? Well, she's not talking about going to school. You can see very quickly that they have a connection. There's some flirtatiousness going on. Now, John Proctor is a farmer, and Abigail Williams, like I said, used to work in his home. Now, Mary Warren, one of the other girls here, now she's the one who's working in his household. But Abigail Williams, she's got something for John Proctor, right? They have a history. And Abby begins to flirt with him right away, right after she enters, right? In the very beginning, or very bottom of page 21, right? She says, "Oh, I forgot how strong you are, John Proctor." Now, age-wise, Proctor's probably in his mid-30s. Abigail Williams is 18 to 20, right? So, this would be a little sketchy in today's world. And we get some more details about what actually happened, right? About what actually happened. They had an affair, right? Let's just bring it out there, okay? They had an affair. John doesn't want this affair to be something that continues, right? But Abigail does, right? She says, "I have a sense for heat, John, and yours has drawn me to my window, and I have seen you looking up, burning in your loneliness. Do you tell me you never looked up at my window?" He's like, "Okay, maybe I've looked up once or twice," right? He calls her a child, and she gets angry. "How dare you call me child?" Right? 22, "I know how you clutched me behind your house and sweated like a stallion whenever I came near." Okay, there's some imagery of a sexual nature here. These two had an affair. Okay, there's some adultery going on. And so when she says on page 24, right, "I took John Proctor, my sleep, and put knowledge in my heart," he made her a woman, right? Let's just say that. And Abigail wants it to continue. Abigail wants this to go on. Now you might understand why she drank blood and tried to conjure a charm to kill John Proctor's wife. Like, Abigail wants to make this an official relationship, not just an adulterous one. She wants John to be her husband, and she is willing to do anything possible to make that the case. Okay, so that is Act 1. Just highlighted Abigail Williams' line, talking about being willing to do anything, right? "I will come to you in the black of some terrible night, and will bring a pointy reckoning that will shudder you." That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the part that you read and got yourself interested in the play. Tomorrow, we will read the second half of Act 1 and engage in some online discussion. But for today, that is all. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out during office hours, and I will talk to you tomorrow.